My dear brothers and sisters, listen closely, for this may be the most important truth you will ever hear about your life, your soul, and your peace. There comes a moment in every person's journey when the noise of the world becomes too loud, when relationships drain more than they bless, and when you realize that being alone with God is not loneliness, it is liberty. Let me ask you, have you ever felt more empty in a crowded room than you did in quiet solitude? Have you ever smiled with someone and still felt a deep ache inside? That's not weakness. That is your soul crying out, not for people, but for God. Living alone in truth beats any relationship that pulls you away from your purpose, from your peace, and from the presence of the Almighty. Do not let the world convince you that your value is based on how many people surround you. Do not let loneliness shame you into begging for attention, validation, or love that is not rooted in truth. It is better, yes, I said, better to be alone with God than together with someone who leaves you spiritually starving. There are times when solitude becomes the sanctuary where God whispers. When the room is quiet, and the phone stops ringing, and the distractions fade, that's when the divine voice begins to rise. That is when you start to see yourself not through the eyes of a partner, a friend, or society, but through the eyes of God. That's when the fog lifts and you begin to recognize who you really are. A soul built for greatness, not manipulation. A heart designed for love, not chaos. A mind molded for peace, not confusion. God will sometimes strip the people away from your life so you can finally see Him clearly. God will allow the breakup, the betrayal, the silent see not to break you, but to bring you back. Because sometimes the most toxic relationship is the one that distracts you from your divine calling. Sometimes you don't even realize how much a person is suffocating your spirit until they are gone. And then suddenly you breathe. Living alone gives you the space to rediscover your worth. It silences the opinions, the criticism, the expectations, and it makes room for the only voice that matters, God's. You don't need a romantic partner to be complete. You don't need someone beside you in bed to feel whole. What you need is to walk so closely with God that anyone who tries to get near you has to go through Him first. There is power in aloneness, sacred power. Because when you are alone, you can no longer hide. When you are alone, the masks come off, the performances stop, and the truth begins. Some of the most powerful people in history were forged in solitude, not in applause, not in crowds, but in caves, in deserts, in the wilderness, where it was just the man God. You see, the world teaches you to chase love, to chase people, to chase someone to complete your life. But God teaches you to stand still, to be still, and know, to be content in Him. Because the moment you stop chasing others and start embracing His presence, something shifts. The anxiety begins to die, the neediness begins to dissolve, you begin to radiate peace, and the peace of God cannot be manufactured, it cannot be imitated. It can only be experienced in the stillness of solitude. So many of you are afraid of being alone because you've equated it with being unloved. But let me tell you, there is no greater love than the love of God. Human love can be fickle. It can change with moods, seasons, and selfishness, but God's love is constant. It doesn't walk out on you when you're broken. It doesn't compare you to others. It doesn't lie to keep you close, it stays. And it heals. And it restores. Living alone is not a curse. It is a calling. It is a divine appointment to go deeper into your purpose. You will never find clarity in confusion. You will never find healing in chaos. And you will never find peace in a person who is not at peace with God. Some of you are holding on to relationships because you fear starting over. But let me tell you something powerful. Every time you walk away from something that God didn't send, you make room for something He did. There is no greater tragedy than staying connected to someone who is draining your soul. You were not created to tolerate dysfunction. You were not created to shrink to make others comfortable. You were not created to beg for attention, for love, for loyalty. You were created to walk in divine power. But you cannot access that power when you are entangled with the wrong people. Living alone is not about isolation, it's about elevation. It's about setting yourself apart so that God can do a new work in you. Some miracles don't happen in the crowd. Some breakthroughs don't happen in the relationship. They happen in the quiet space, where only you and God meet. They happen when no one else is around to distract you. They happen when you finally say, God, take everything and give me you. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is a cry of the flesh, but aloneness is often a setup from God. God does His best work when the world goes silent. He reshapes your character. He rewires your thinking. He uproots the lies you believed about yourself, and He plants the seeds of purpose, strength, and divine identity. You must stop fearing what the world calls singleness or loneliness. Stop treating it as a season to be endured. It is a season to be embraced. It is in this place that your discernment sharpens. Your standards rise, your peace grows. You no longer accept what is cheap because you understand your value. You no longer tolerate what is toxic because you've tasted what is holy. Some of you have cried yourself to sleep because someone walked away. Some of you have begged God to bring someone back. But let me ask you, why would God bring back someone who damages what He's healing? Why would God return what He rescued you from? Some people were not removed as punishment, but as protection. God will allow the removal to prevent the ruin. Living alone is not a punishment, it is a pruning. And only when you are pruned can you truly bear fruit. You have to learn to sit in silence, not as a victim, but as a vessel. A vessel ready to be filled, a vessel ready to be used, a vessel ready to overflow with strength, peace, and clarity. Let the world chase relationships. Let the world mock your solitude. But you choose God. Choose peace. Choose purpose. Because a peaceful life alone is far more blessed than a chaotic life with someone who doesn't value your soul. You do not need another voice in your life if it's going to silence the voice of God. You do not need a warm body beside you if it leaves your spirit cold. You do not need a partner who applauds you publicly but dishonors you privately. What you need is alignment with God. What you need is restoration from the inside out. And that cannot be done while you're entangled with what's wounding you. Living alone teaches you how to be full without needing to be filled by another person. It teaches you how to stand when no one applauds. It teaches you how to glow without validation. That's real power. That's divine maturity. Because the truth is, until you are happy alone, you will never be happy with anyone else. You must stop measuring your worth by your relationship status. You are not half of a soul. You are not waiting for completion. You are whole. You are loved. You are enough. And you are already in a relationship with the one who created you, formed you, breathed life into you, and walks with you every step of the way. Some of you are crying for companionship when God is calling you to consecration. Some of you are searching for love when God is drawing you into His presence. Stop looking outward. Start looking upward. Because the love you are craving is not found in someone else's arms, it is found in God's presence. There is a sacred joy that comes from living alone with God. A joy that doesn't fade when people walk away. A joy that doesn't depend on compliments or company. A joy that radiates from within because you know who you are, and more importantly, you know whose you are. Let the world chase trends. Let others chase temporary pleasures. But you still be separate. Be set apart. God will bless your aloneness. God will increase your discernment. God will multiply your strength. And when the time is right, if it aligns with His will, God will bring the right people, people who don't compete with Him but complement what He's building in you. But until then, rest. Rest in the silence. Rest in the solitude. Rest in the sacred space where it's just you and God. That is not a void. That is victory. That is not emptiness. That is empowerment. Living alone is not the end of your story. It may just be the beginning of the most powerful chapter of your life. Because when all else is stripped away and only God remains, you will find that He is enough. More than enough. And when you reach that point, when your soul is saturated with His presence, see nothing else compares. No relationship, no companionship, no human touch can replace the sacred intimacy between a soul and its Creator. That is the truth the world will never tell you. But God will show you if you dare to walk the path of solitude. There is a sacred weight that rests upon the soul that chooses to walk alone with God. It is not the burden of loneliness, it is the mantle of divine preparation. You must understand this truth with every fiber of your being. Solitude is not suffering when it is ordained by God. It is a divine strategy, a holy separation, a season where God hides you not to punish you, but to preserve you. Because there are some battles you can only win in silence. There are some anointings that are only poured in private. There are some revelations you cannot receive in the company of noise, confusion, and distractions. God is not interested in crowded hearts. He is not competing for space. When He calls you into isolation, it is because He wants your full attention. When He allows certain people to walk away, it is because He is protecting your ears from voices that were never meant to shape your destiny. You don't need another opinion when God is speaking truth. You don't need another relationship when God is establishing covenant with your soul. He is not trying to make you feel abandoned. He is preparing you for something that others cannot carry. You see, many of us pray for strength but refuse the path that leads to it. We ask God for clarity but fear the silence where clarity is born. We want peace but cling to people who constantly bring us pain. And God in His mercy will begin to remove what you refuse to release. He will close doors you kept forcing open. He will cut ties you kept mending. Not because He wants to see you hurt, but because He knows what's ahead. And He cannot allow you to carry dead weight into a living future. Living alone becomes a sanctuary for growth when you stop viewing it through the eyes of the flesh and begin to see it through the lens of the Spirit. The world will tell you that success looks like marriage, partnership, companionship. But the truth is, success is walking in obedience to God, regardless of who walks with you or not. If you have to walk alone to obey God, walk. If you have to lose people to keep your peace, let them go. If you have to sit in silence to hear the voice of the Most High, then be still. There are divine assignments placed on your life that cannot be fulfilled while your heart is entangled with the wrong people. Some of you are trying to take people with you into a future God only designed for you. And every time you try to hold on, you delay what God wants to release. Every time you try to explain your worth to someone who doesn't see it, you drain your spirit. Stop trying to prove yourself to people who are not even qualified to understand your purpose. Stop lowering your standard to accommodate those who were never called to rise with you. God sees what you do in secret. He sees the tears you never speak of. He knows the ache in your chest when you turn off the lights and lie down in a quiet room. But hear me, your quiet season is not your punishment. It is your preparation. Do not curse the silence. It is in the silence that your roots grow deep. It is in the silence that your character is refined. It is in the silence that your faith is tested and your strength is born. Let the world misunderstand you. Let them call you distant, cold, difficult. Let them say you've changed. You have. You've grown. You've awakened. You've recognized that not everyone deserves access to your spirit, that not every relationship deserves revival, that not every connection is divine. You've realized that peace is a gift from God, and anything that disrupts it must be examined. You've realized that some people were assignments, but their season is over. Living alone is not about rejecting love, it's about protecting your peace. It's not about bitterness, it's about boundaries. You are not obligated to stay connected to what wounds your soul. You are not bound to what drains your light. You owe no one access to your spirit except the one who created it. And when you walk in that authority, you begin to move differently. You speak with power. You choose with wisdom. You wait with discernment. And most of all, you refuse to settle. Do not fear silence. God does His loudest work in quiet seasons. Do not fear solitude. God refines His greatest vessels when they are hidden. Think of it like this. When a tree is planted, it doesn't immediately bloom. It must first go underground in darkness, in silence, while its roots anchor. Only then does it break through the surface. And when it does, it stands tall, firm, unshakable. That is what God is doing in you. You are being rooted, grounded, strengthened, so when the storm comes, you won't fall. So when the wind howls, you won't break. So when the next relationship enters your life, it will have to meet a version of you that is anchored in God, not desperate for people. Some of you are waiting for someone to come and complete your story, but your story is not incomplete. You are not a half. You are whole. And until you believe that, you will continue to allow people to treat you as optional. You will continue to accept behavior that insults your soul. You will continue to crave what God is calling you to crucify. No more. Today is the day you stop idolizing relationships and start prioritizing God. Today is the day you stop begging for love and start walking in purpose. Today is the day you realize that living alone doesn't mean being without. It means being within the will of God, within the peace of God, within the presence of God. You will never find true rest until your spirit is settled in Him. You will never find a person who can fill the void that only God was meant to fill. You will never build a healthy relationship until you build a strong relationship with your Creator. Because the truth is, your solitude will teach you what your spirit needs. It will expose what you tolerated. It will reveal what you avoided, and most importantly, it will reconnect you to the voice of God that so many of us have drowned in the noise of others. Let this be the season where you stop running from being alone and start running into the arms of your Creator. Let this be the season where you no longer see your value through the eyes of the world, but through the gaze of God. Let this be the season where you stop asking, "Why am I still alone?" and start declaring, "Thank God I am." Because when the wrong people leave your life, the right blessings begin to enter. And many of those blessings aren't people, they're peace, clarity, direction, and power. You don't always need someone beside you, you need God inside you. You don't need validation from a partner, you need confirmation from God. You don't need to be desired by others, you need to be directed by your Creator. Walk this journey with your head high. Not in arrogance, but in confidence. Not because people approve of you, but because God walks with you. Not because you have all the answers, but because you finally know where to look for them. No more searching for love that was never meant to last. No more begging for attention that disappears with moods. No more selling your peace for companionship. You are not alone, you are aligned. Aligned with your purpose. Aligned with your calling. Aligned with your destiny. You are walking through a narrow path, but it leads to wide blessings. The world cannot understand this kind of peace. They'll say, "You're too selective, too distant, too holy, let them talk." Because the more you walk with God, the less you care about fitting into places He didn't design for you. You've cried long enough, you've questioned yourself long enough, you've blamed yourself long enough. Now it's time to rise, to embrace the divine solitude, to protect the sacred space where God is pouring into you. Let no one invade it. Let no one devalue it. Let no one disturb it. Living alone beats any relationship that disconnects you from the presence, purpose, and peace of God. And when you finally grasp that truth deep in your soul, you'll stop seeing this season as a valley and start seeing it as a mountain, a place of strength, a place of vision, a place of divine encounter. You are not waiting for your life to begin. You are living it now. And the God who holds your future is standing beside you in your present. Be still. Be strong. Be faithful. Because the one who walks alone with God walks with more power than 1,000 who follow the crowd. And I tell you now, there is a sacred strength that only emerges when you stop depending on others to carry what only God was meant to hold. When you stop searching for someone to complete what God has already made whole within you, a divine fire begins to awaken. It is not pride, it is not arrogance. It is holy confidence, the kind that comes from being refined by solitude and anointed by silence. Too many souls today are weary not because they are alone, but because they are carrying relationships that God never signed off on. They are fighting battles in homes built on sand. They are praying for peace in unions that were forged from loneliness, not purpose. But when you dare to walk alone with God, you step out of the chaos and into clarity. You trade the noise of emotional warfare for the calm of divine wisdom. Some of the greatest revelations of your life will come not when you're surrounded, but when you're separated. Separation is not always rejection. Sometimes it's redirection. Sometimes it's divine filtration, God removing what you thought you needed so He can show you what you were always meant to be. Alone does not mean abandoned. Alone means chosen. Alone means set apart. Alone means sanctified for a greater assignment. The world will say you're too picky. Let them say it. Because you don't belong to the world, you belong to God. And what God is shaping in you is too valuable to be placed in the hands of just anyone. When you live alone and live aligned with God, your standards rise. Not because you think you're better, but because you finally know your worth. You no longer accept surface love when you were created for something sacred. You cannot build a divine future while clinging to what God is trying to prune. Every relationship not rooted in truth will become a trap. Every union that drains your spirit is a detour from your destiny. You were not called to confusion. You were not designed for dysfunction. You were crafted in the image of divine order. That's why your spirit grieves when you settle. That's why your peace disappears when you ignore God's voice. Because something in your soul knows this is not it. Living alone is where you begin to hear the quiet affirmations of your Creator. It's where you begin to recognize that your spirit does not need to chase. It needs to rest. It needs to be still and trust that what is meant for you will find you without you losing yourself to obtain it. You do not need to manipulate or perform or sacrifice your values to be seen. God sees you. God knows you. And when He is enough, nothing else feels like lack. You don't need a partner to be faithful. You don't need a relationship to be righteous. You don't need a title to be valuable. You don't need another person to give you the courage to obey God. Because when God becomes your foundation, your heart no longer crumbles when others leave. Your joy no longer fades when others change. You become unshakable. Not because life is easy, but because your soul is anchored. Let the world glorify companionship. Let the world worship romantic entanglements. But you glorify the solitude that God has given you. In it, He is forming you. In it, He is fortifying you. In it, He is preparing you to carry blessings that cannot be handled with weak hands and wounded hearts. You cannot receive the fullness of God's promise while your soul is fractured from broken attachments. And hear me now, living alone teaches you how to discern the difference between what feels good and what is good. It sharpens your vision. It purifies your motives. It helps you see through the charm and hear the truth. Because not everyone who speaks well is sent by God. Not everyone who wants your heart has the strength to protect it. Not everyone who smiles at your light knows how to honor it. That's why God must isolate you before He elevates you, so that your heart is no longer deceived by flattery, so that your spirit no longer craves what once broke you, so that you don't mistake counterfeit affection for divine connection, because what is from God will never require you to betray yourself. What is from God will never silence your spirit. What is from God will never compromise your peace. Living alone is where the real cleansing happens. It's where the spiritual toxins are drained. It's where the emotional dependencies are broken. It's where the lies you believed about yourself are uprooted. Lies that told you you weren't worthy unless someone claimed you. Lies that told you you were unlovable unless someone pursued you. Lies that whispered your value was in how needed you were, not how aligned you are with God. But when you finally let those lies die in the furnace of solitude, you rise. And when you rise, the right people can no longer manipulate you. The wrong people no longer appeal to you. You begin to attract not what your wounds crave, but what your healed soul requires. That is what God is preparing in you now. That is why He has called you into a season of separation, not to crush you, but to crown you. You must walk through this fire alone, so that when you come out, you will no longer be forged by fear, but by faith. You must sit in this stillness so that the voice of God is no longer drowned out by the noise of the world. And when you emerge, because you will carry a power that does not depend on people. A joy that is not tied to circumstance, a peace that no human being can give or take. And oh, what a powerful place that is. To walk through life knowing that your contentment is not borrowed, your value is not conditional, your spirit is not tethered to the changing winds of human affection, but rooted, grounded, alive in the presence of the one who formed you from dust and breathed His own breath into your lungs. And now hear this deep and holy truth: when God strips you from the noise of people, it is because He is bringing you into the sound of purpose. When He removes certain relationships, it's not to leave you abandoned in the wilderness, it's to lead you to the mountain of revelation. God does not take away what you need. He removes what you cling to so you can finally cling to Him. He separates you, not to punish your soul, but to sanctify it. Because some destinies are too sacred to be shared with unclean hands and unguarded heart. You must come to a place in your spirit where you say, even if no one walks with me, I will walk with God. You must reach that point where you stop needing everyone's agreement to follow the truth burning in your soul. Because the closer you draw to God, the more misunderstood you may become. The more focused you get, the more the crowd thins out. That is not loss, that is alignment. That is God sifting what cannot go with you into the next level of your life. This world will always try to convince you that to be alone is to be lacking. But that is a lie spoken from the mouths of those who have never tasted the fullness of walking in divine communion with the Almighty. There is a joy that no earthly bond can replicate. There is a peace that no conversation, no companionship, no company can substitute. When God becomes your source, you no longer chase what drains you. You protect what feeds you. You guard what lifts you. You nurture what aligns with the will of the Most High. So many people spend years in relationships that feel like prisons. Their laughter is forced, their smiles are masked, their hearts are heavy. Why? Because they chose connection over conviction. They chose not to be alone, and in doing so, they forfeited their divine assignment. But when you choose God over the crowd, when you choose quiet over compromise, when you choose growth over gratification, then you begin to live. God cannot fill a heart that is already crowded. He cannot move fully in a life filled with counterfeit alliances. You must be willing to empty your hands of what is not from Him so He can pour into you what cannot be bought, replaced, or taken. The world might call you strange. Your family might not understand. Friends may call you cold. Let them. Because you are not living for the applause of people. You are living for the approval of the one who holds the breath in your lung. Living alone is not emptiness, it is preparation. And preparation is always private. No one sees the caterpillar inside the cocoon. No one hears the stretching, the struggle, the transformation. But when it emerges glorious, graceful, free, it no longer crawls in the dirt, it flies. And that is what God is doing in you. You are not being forgotten. You are being formed. You are not in a holding pattern, you are in a holy process. Some of you are in a divine pause, and it is testing your patience. You want companionship, you want closeness, you want someone to speak to your soul. But understand this, when you wait on God, He gives you not what your emotions crave, but what your spirit needs. He does not operate on your timeline, He operates in perfect timing. He withholds not to harm you, but to preserve you. And when He finally moves, everything that felt like a delay will reveal itself to be protection. Don't despise this alone time. Use it. Dig into your identity. Deepen your understanding. Detox from the lies that culture has fed you. Purge your mind of expectations that never aligned with God's voice. Tear down every false idol you've raised, romance, approval, beauty, validation, and let God rebuild you with truth. This is where real maturity happens. This is where your discernment sharpens like a sword. This is where your vision clears and you start to see with spiritual eyes. You begin to see that not every smile is sincere, that not every hand extended is a blessing, that not every presence in your life is meant to stay. And so you stop holding on to what's fading. You stop watering what's already withered. You stop running after what God has already removed, because you now know anything you have to beg to stay is not from God. When you live alone and walk with God, your spirit becomes sensitive. You don't move based on feelings, you move by divine direction. You stop rushing because you trust that God's plan is better than your own. You stop comparing your journey to others because you realize what He has for you is uniquely crafted, set apart, and cannot be replicated or stolen. You no longer seek attention, you walk in intention. You no longer chase love, you become love. The love that is rooted in God, centered in truth, and shielded by peace. Let the world do what it will. Let others settle. Let them enter relationships just to avoid loneliness. But you be different. Be bold. Be set apart. Because when you finally understand the power of living alone with God, you stop seeing it as a temporary setback and you begin to view it as divine strategy. You don't just endure it, you embrace it. You don't just tolerate it, you treasure it. And from that place, God begins to download things into your spirit that the average person will never receive: secrets, instructions, assignments. He begins to speak to you in the night watches. He begins to reveal traps you couldn't see. He begins to align your steps so precisely that no detour can derail you. And when you walk in that kind of covering, there is no room left for desperation, for confusion, or fear. Because living alone with God teaches you this unshakable truth. You are not waiting for someone to give you a name, you already have one. You are not waiting to be chosen, you were chosen when you were formed. You are not waiting to be rescued, you are already walking with the one who holds all power. Do not compromise your soul just to fill an empty chair. Do not silence your convictions just to keep a relationship. Do not hide your light just to be accepted. You were not created to blend in. You were created to shine, and sometimes the The cost of that light is solitude. But better to shine alone with God than to be surrounded by shadows. So lift your head, strengthen your spine, guard your spirit, and keep walking. Walk with the confidence of one who has been called. Walk with the wisdom of one who has been refined. Walk with the peace of one who no longer needs anything but God. Because when you walk with God alone, you never walk alone. You walk with purpose, you walk with clarity, you walk with power, and above all, you walk in truth. And no relationship, no praise, no touch, no human affection will ever compare to the fullness of that holy path. And if your heart is still trembling at the thought of walking alone, let me tell you what you call loneliness. God calls leadership. What you feel as isolation, God uses as elevation. There is no voice louder, no hand stronger, no presence more comforting than God's when He has chosen to deal with you privately. So stop asking, why am I alone? And begin asking, what is God trying to show me in this silence? Because the sacred moments when the world grows quiet are the very moments when eternity begins to speak. It is in the aloneness that God purges your dependence on the temporary. He burns away the need for approval. He detoxes your heart from people who only stood near you for their benefit. He begins to rewire your desires so that you no longer crave shallow validation, but you hunger for holy transformation. And let me tell you, when that process begins, it will not always feel comfortable. Growth never does. Refinement never comes without fire. But when it is finished, you will walk out not fragile but fortified, not empty but equipped, not ashamed of your season alone but thankful for it. You will begin to thank God for every unanswered call. You will begin to praise Him for the doors that never opened. You will rejoice over the people who left, because now you see it was not a rejection, it was a rescue. You were not being abandoned, you were being advanced. Because God knows what your future holds, and He cannot allow you to drag dead weight into a living promise. Some people only came into your life to teach you a lesson, not to walk with you into destiny. And when their time expires, their presence becomes poison. That's why God had to remove them. That's why He had to separate you. Because He loves you too much to let your destiny be delayed by people who don't even understand your value. Let the tears come, but don't let them blind you. Let the ache happen, but don't let it define you. Because every tear you cry in private, God collects. Every moment you sit in silence, wondering what's next, God sees. And in due time, He will reward your obedience, and not with another distraction, but with divine direction. Not with just any companionship, but with a peace so deep, it drowns out the desire for what is less than holy. There is something fierce and majestic about a soul that has learned to be alone with God and still be whole, when you no longer search for someone to fix you, because you've learned to sit in the presence of the one who made you, when you no longer beg for attention, because you know your name is already written in a higher place, when you no longer chase fleeting connections, because you are rooted in a relationship that cannot be broken. God is not merely trying to comfort you in this season. He is calling you to mastery. Mastery over your emotions. Mastery over your distractions. Mastery over your past. This is not just about being alone, it's about being consecrated. You have been set apart for something uncommon, something eternal. And if it costs you temporary affection to walk in eternal purpose, so be it. This world is full of shallow waters, but you were created for the deep. And deep cannot walk with shallow, purpose cannot walk with confusion, and peace cannot walk with chaos. You must choose. Will you settle for the presence of people or pursue the presence of God? Will you compromise your calling to avoid the discomfort of being alone? Or will you stand in the fire of transformation until what's divine begins to rise in you? Make no mistake, solitude is not weakness. It is warfare. It is where the spiritual battle is fought and won. It is where demons are cast out of your thoughts, where wounds are stitched by unseen hands, where lies lose their power and truth gains its voice. It is where the divine armor of clarity, strength, and resilience is fastened onto your spirit. You cannot carry your calling and still be addicted to being liked. You cannot walk with God and still be led by the hand of approval. You cannot speak truth and be embraced by everyone. The path of the called is narrow and often lonely, but it is sacred. And if you dare to walk it, you will find that what you thought you lost was nothing compared to what God is building within you. The more you embrace the silence, the more you will hear, not with your ears, but with your spirit. You'll begin to discern the difference between what sounds good and what is good. You'll begin to recognize the subtle voice of God guiding you not just in big decisions, but in the quiet, daily moments. And in that closeness, you will no longer fear being alone, because you've tasted the fullness of His companionship. You will stop seeking to be understood, because you will be satisfied with being known by God. You will stop trying to explain your worth, because you now walk in the confidence that your worth is non-negotiable. You will stop chasing what is convenient and start walking toward what is consecrated. Let the silence be your sanctuary. Let the stillness be your teacher. Let the emptiness be the place where God fills you with new oil, fresh fire, unshakable truth. Because when you walk out of this season, you will not walk as who you were. You will walk as one who has been with God, one who carries something sacred, one who speaks with weight, one who walks with fire. And from that point forward, you will never again accept what is beneath your calling. You will never again return to places that once made you feel small. You will never again trade your peace for companionship. You will guard what God has built in you. You will steward the quiet place as the sacred ground where your soul learned to breathe. So if God has called you into the shadows for a time, trust that the light is coming. And when it comes, it will not just shine on you, it will shine through you. But until that day, walk faithfully in the quiet. Dance in the silence. Stand boldly in the solitude. Because you are not just living alone, you are living chosen, living guarded, living awakened. This is your season, not of absence, but of abundance. Not of lack, but of learning. Not of sorrow, but of strength. And when you walk with God, you discover that even in solitude, your soul lacks nothing, because He is there. He has always been there, and He will never leave you alone. So now I speak to your spirit with fire and with clarity. If God has called you to walk alone, walk with boldness. If He has stripped away every distraction, praise Him for the purification. If He has placed you in a quiet season, thank Him for the holy stillness. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are not less. You are being shaped by the very hands that formed the stars and commanded the oceans. What you gain in solitude cannot be taken by the world, because it was never given by the world. When you walk alone with God, you walk in divine rhythm. You walk in sacred alignment. You walk not in fear, but in authority. This world may never understand you. People may turn away. But if you have God, you lack nothing. In Him is your peace. In Him is your worth. In Him is your direction. And in Him your soul finds its home. So walk forward, not as someone who is alone, but as someone who is accompanied by the eternal presence of God. Your steps are ordered. Your heart is guarded. Your future is prepared. And your solitude is not a sentence, it is a sanctuary. Embrace it. Honor it. And let your life become the living testimony that living alone with God truly beats any relationship this world could ever offer.